Welcome to the Internet History Podcast. I'm your host, Brian McCullough. Most of you will know Chris Fralic as a partner in the VC firm First Round Capital here in New York City. But Chris was also heavily involved in two key companies that we'll be talking plenty more about over the next year, Half.com and Delicious. In this episode, Chris gives us the history and the context for these two innovative companies, as well as sharing some stories from an interesting career, stories that range from competing against Michael Dell to sell computers in the 1980s, the true success of eBay in the late 90s and early 2000s, and even launching TED Talks online. I know you're going to enjoy this spectacular episode with Chris Fralic. Chris Fralic, thanks for coming on the Internet History Podcast.
Pleasure to be here, Brian.
Well, so as you know, we try to get a little bit of background, and my cliche question to everybody is, were you into computers as a kid? But let me switch it up a little bit and say, or ask, when you were a kid, what did you imagine you wanted to do with your career and as an adult?
I think as I was going into college, for some reason, I thought I wanted to be into hotel management because I like staying at hotels and nice places, but I was exposed a little bit to computers through my dad. Through his company was the first chance that I got to work with computers. In high school, they were off in a separate room. They didn't let the regular kids, only the smartest kids got to play with the early PCs. But in college, I got a chance at my dad's company and then on my own to really start working with them, and eventually had a CP/M-based Columbia Data Products product back in 83, 84 in my dorm room at Villanova, and it was kind of like a halt and catch fire kind of time frame. It was before MS-DOS was massive, and I had that and played with it, and it was pretty unusual for anyone at school, much less a business student. And then luckily through that and good connections, ended up working in the computer reseller world for a decade right out of college.
If I'm wrong about this, well, first of all, you actually managed a computer store, a retail store, right?
Correct.
And that was in your hometown, Jonathan's Computer Centers or something like that?
Yeah, in Philadelphia, it was the local 3-store chain. It was one of the first handful of Apple dealers that were authorized in the late 70s, and myself and 2 other Villanova buddies all went to work selling PCs, and I became the manager of one of the stores.
Imagine that, computer retail.
Yes.
But you, as you say, you do go into selling computers in the early 80s, and this is, if I'm wrong about this, I'll take it out so as not to embarrass myself. But
Yep.
You might have a fun story about competing with another kid selling computers around this time.
No, that's true. So I started selling computers on the retail floor of this place called Jonathan's. Over the 10-year period, I worked at a variety of different computer resellers that focused more on corporate sales, and through the process learned all the above, including managing teams and getting up into bigger volumes. And I remember back in probably 85 or 86, my big customer TV Guide, who was in Radnor, Pennsylvania, had bought a dozen or so IBMs from me, and I delivered them well, and I thought they were happy, and I was bidding on a 100 PC order. It was the biggest order you could imagine in my life, and I lost the order, and I couldn't imagine why. And I went to my guy, and he said, we ended up getting this thing called PCs Limited, was the brand, and it was from a kid who turned out to be in his dorm room in Austin, Texas, and it was Michael Dell, and it was later Dell Computers. And I it was out of the blue. I never heard of, like, how could you buy something through the mail? You have to come into the store and have a salesperson like me, and Dell changed the industry, and the computer reseller channel, retail channel, virtually disappeared, and then now it's kind of back in life and favor with Apple stores and the like. But it was, back in the day, that's how it all worked.
Did you ever hear the story? Did he just out hustle you or something?
I don't think there's any story from his side. He was just kind of growing, and he was probably selling IBM compatibles for 30 or 40% less than I was selling IBMs. But I did get to meet him once over the years. I don't think he recalls that story.
Right, probably not. But so you're generally selling PCs, compacts, IBMs, what?
IBMs, Apples, compacts.
Mm-hmm.
I started when the Apple IIc came out and the Macintosh 128. It was both in 1984, and kind of built up through products like notably like Compaq came up and grew into the fastest growing company and that hit 100 million in sales ever at the time. IBM came out with the PS2 architecture, and then it was interesting. I'm heading to the TED conference, and I found something was written up at the first time I went in 1994, and I some stats that in 1993 I was responsible for the sale of over 5,000 computers to the 3 customers that I worked with. One of them was Eli Lilly, and it was their first Salesforce automation project, and they bought something like over 2,000 Compaq portables, and it was the first time all their salespeople got laptops at once, and so we delivered all that through Computerland at the time.
Right. So you end up in the early '90s. You're at Computerland. Just as an aside, coming up through sales like that, do you think that's a good lesson for entrepreneurs to have the sales background like that?
Yeah, I think it's been very useful for me. So I come from a hardware and a PC and channel background, but always a sales and a business development background, and I think that's a non-traditional. It'd be hard to find a lot of investors today, or to a large degree, founders of companies that come up through a sales background. They tend to come from more of a technical background,
right.
Engineering background. So I think it's unique, but I think it's served me well.
After Computerland, stop me if I'm skipping over any important lessons or anything here, but how do you go towards Oracle? Because I think it's at Oracle where you start to get involved in internet things.
So, again, I'd say probably around the 1993 or so time frame, 93 or 4, you start to sense things starting to change. And like through 95, when the internet bell rung with the Netscape IPO and everyone asking if you've tried Mosaic and got a sense of the internet, there were a lot of things in flux. Like I remember one of my papers as I was finishing up graduate school was about the information superhighway. Like you kind of thought that's what it was going to be. But I was generally, I had started going to the TED conference. That's where I eventually met Josh Koppelman of Half.com and now First Round. And when I started reading Wired, like I remember when it first came out, I bought like 10 issues and I gave them away to everyone because I thought it was the most interesting thing happening. And it was all tying into the internet. And a friend of mine was working for Oracle, and he called me and said, we've got a job. It's basically selling our new internet products to the likes of Time Inc. and Warner Brothers and AOL as customers. Would you be interested in that? And it was a dream job. Like I was interested in.
Had you not been in the Valley before that?
I was always in the East Coast.
Uh-huh.
Later on moved there for a little bit with eBay, but always been, Philadelphia, New York corridor basically. But that was my first like full-time job in the internet. And I remember like when the Netscape IPO happened, I don't think I verbalized it, but I was essentially committing my career to the internet. Like everything I've done ever since then has been pretty directly tied into that. And and the first like full-time job commitment was with Oracle, selling the likes of those companies. And I remember I listened to your episode with Paul Sagan about Pathfinder. I was in the basement of Time Inc. watching those guys work and talking to them about how an Oracle database could help them build and scale faster and better.
So that's at Oracle. That's what you're working on is as the internet's exploding, getting the Oracle databases and stuff tied into what people are doing. Yeah.
And it was trying to build the back end systems and databases that could tie into the web servers, and it was early days. Everyone was interested in talking about it, and they knew they had headed in that direction. And ultimately, a lot of them bought a lot of databases to support all their development efforts.
Let me take another sideline here to ask a question that I ask a lot, but you brought it up. So, do you remember the feeling? There's the famous Mark Andreessen quote when he gets out there that Silicon Valley was kind of dead. Like before Netscape happens, there was the recession of the early '90s, and there's some quote that no one had a good idea since Larry Ellison had decided to grow a beard.
I heard that. I thought that was hilarious.
Do you remember that sensation of, okay, there's something coming, there's something new on the horizon?
No, I guess I was lucky enough to be so far away from it. Like when I would go out west, it would almost be like, visiting the Holy Land. Like it was like I felt so honored to be able to go to Apple's headquarters in Cupertino, or to go to, I got an early visit to Wired magazine in the early days, and I just literally thought that was the center of the universe, and so cool. So I didn't have that perspective of being in the valley and feeling like there was not much going on. It felt pretty exciting from afar as I got to come and visit it.
But as you say, your sense is that the internet is the next big thing, and I'm going to tie my career to this.
Yeah, and again, like you don't realize it at the time, but like there were things, interactive TV was something that was a big head fake at the end of the day. Then, people were very excited about CD-ROMs. Like that was a big deal. Like
and pen computing.
And pen computing. Like I remember, like I found out about TED because I was at the Mac World in 1993 when the Newton came out, and I saw a video, and it was Jaron Lanier of virtual reality fame in a video with his dreadlocks and the gloves and the goggles, and I stopped in my tracks and said, "What is that?" And the guy said, "Oh, it's this thing called the TED Conference. It'll never happen again. You should buy these videotapes and you can watch it." And I did, and then I found out it's happening, and I ended up being able to go, and that was a pivotal moment for me, and connected to a lot of great people.
Well, so let's talk about that now, because we'll come back to TED, I think, again later. But so you attend your first TED conference in what, 94, 95?
94.
Okay.
Yes.
And that's the original.
It was TED 5. It's happening next week, so
right.
That's why I'm up to date on the history of it, because I happened to look it up. But it was I applied in 93, and probably shouldn't have qualified. But one of my tricks was I actually wrote out the check for the deposit for the full amount of the conference and sent it in with my application, and realized thinking that might help my chances.
Right.
And I remember I didn't have that much money in my checking account. It was $1,450, and so I had to write it on a line of credit. But I just thought that was a good investment if I could get into that conference, and I did. And I went in 94, and that was TED 5, and I've been to most of them since, and ended up working at TED for a little bit too.
And you'd met Josh there?
Yep, it was through a connection of someone Josh used to work with, but soon after, probably in the 95 time frame, I would guess, I met Josh and Howard, who were the founders of First Round, and Josh eventually later was starting a thing called half.com back in 99, and I'd stayed in touch with them for a few years off and on, and then that's how we first connected, and Howard was an investor.
We'll get to that.
Yep.
I want to do a little bit of credit to your time at AOL.
Yes.
And that comes right after Oracle?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of a funny story. So I was at Oracle calling on AOL, and there was a key executive there at AOL who would cancel my meetings constantly, like almost comically. Like I'd set up a meeting and it would get canceled, and so I set one up for far in advance, and I set it up as a phone call to make it like less threatening, and it stayed on the calendar. And then that morning, I called this person's assistant, and I said, "I'm just confirming our meeting, and by the way, you can tell them I'm in the lobby if you'd like to meet in person." I drove down from Philadelphia, and the person like was so excited, burst through the doors and said, "Wow, you came all the way down here. Come on in," and took a liking to me, and ended up hiring me away from Oracle.
To do what?
To work on AOL Enterprise, which was a bit of an ill-fated idea. So back in those days, AOL had just shifted over from pay-per-hour dial-up to all you could eat for, I think it was $19.95 a month or something like that. And that was the infamous busy signal problem, which they dealt with. And to my credit, I'd say, like, when I heard the busy signal problem, it bothered everyone else. To me, it was a sign that customers loved it. They could not live without it. They were so excited to get into it, and they could eventually fix that with more modems and other.
I think
things.
Jan Brandt said that too. Yeah.
Yes, and that was a great podcast. I'd recommend everyone listen to that. But my job was to go and sell to businesses what were essentially empty airline seats during the day. If you looked at the usage of AOL, it peaked and spiked in the evenings, and it wasn't doing much in the daytime. And AOL had fixed infrastructure, so they were trying to go to corporations to have them pay to use that service for dial-up for their employees.
So just ISP services for
essentially like remote ISP services. And one of the challenges at the time was there were two major ones. One was we were trying to charge by the hour for corporate customers when any individual could get all they could eat for a fixed price. So that was a little bit of a hard value prop. And the other thing was it was very slow. Literally every bit had to travel from, the employee to Dulles, Virginia, to the servers, back to Dulles, back, and it was extremely slow. And I remember coming back reporting that, the CIO of a Price Waterhouse basically laughed me out of his office because of all these reasons. And so my time at AOL was not meant to be a long one. But
it's funny. There's you run into things like if you talk to people that were always in New York, at some point you'll find out they were at DoubleClick. There's 5 or 6 people now that I've spoken to that around this era, 96, 97, they were all at AOL. AOL hoovered up people because there was the AOL greenhouse and all sorts of things going on.
There was so much going on, and it was exciting, being there for a short time, but also selling to them and being around them. And it was truly the center of the universe, was in the main lobby in Dulles, Virginia, in that period of time in the 90s. And for a while as a salesman, they would have physical write-in. People would sign in, and if you learn how to read upside down, which is an important skill if you're a salesperson in those days, you could see which competitors and which other companies and startups were in the visiting AOL that day, and that stuff moved markets. It was like they were the kingmakers. I think at the end of the day they took advantage of the leverage that they had, and but.
Yeah, they had a reputation for driving hard bargains.
Tough deal makers and very creative, but they were, they got community content commerce before anyone else did. Ted Leonsis was saying that, a long time before it was cool today, and it was, again, I've seen it over the years at different places, from, Google to Facebook and others. eBay was for a little while, but that was the center of the tech universe.
So I want to see if I can shoehorn in here the Nextron Communications, because that would be the first true startup that you worked for? Is that right?
Yeah. So that was my first big failure at a company, and so it was also my first foray into venture capital. So I went to one of their investors to find out about getting into venture capital, and the answer was, it's really hard and there's really not much opportunity here, but you can go to work for one of our companies. And there were good people there, and I learned a lot. But
what did it do?
It was basically helping build websites for small businesses. So they would literally partner with phone companies and the pizza shop would stuff an envelope with menus and pictures and logos and seal it and send it in, and then we would have people build that website for a monthly fee.
Mm-hmm.
It was very services intensive,
Mm-hmm.
but it was under capitalized, and there were a lot of things I just didn't understand going into it.
There had to be hundreds of companies like that at the time.
Yeah, there were, and like what I learned is like you need to ask key questions about how much cash is in the bank and what's the runway. Like at the time, I didn't realize they literally had to go every month to their VC and ask for more money to make payroll for the next month.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, it didn't sour you because we're getting into half.com now as promised. So,
yeah.
tell me the story from your point of view of how you joined the half.com project, and then we'll get into some of the stories of half.com itself.
So, I had kept in touch with Josh and found him to be, this brilliant young founder that I would try to help where I could, and he would help me with various things off and on. And I had read an article where he was mentioned in the Wall Street Journal, and in the summer of '99, just pinged him congratulating him on the article, and he said, "Hey, I'm starting a new thing. Do you want to have lunch and talk about it?" And we sat down at a restaurant in Conshohocken, PA, and I heard about this used books, movies, and games idea, and I thought it was interesting, and I thought he was a really smart guy, and I was just mulling it over, and then I was like driving home, and I literally got like this feeling in my stomach of like, wait, this is a massive idea. I've got to be a part of this, and I pulled over to the side of the road, and I pulled out my Palm 7 with a little antenna, and I tapped out a message to Josh saying, basically, I'm in. Like, I went in, and it was waiting for him when he got back to his office, and that was, that wasn't easy to do back in that day. So I made a statement, and ultimately joined as the head of business development at Half right when we were, it was the summer of 1999. The internet craze was all around us, and what turned out to be like a pattern. There were 4 people in the company when I joined, and that later happened a couple other times. And had to figure everything out from scratch. And if you're interested, I found recently my pitch deck. I went in to sell myself with a 20-page PowerPoint with all my thoughts about what half.com, or was called Half Off at the time, should do, and how to think about it, and how to get into
to sell yourself to Josh, or
yes, to sell myself to Josh and to his investors, and I just it'd be something I'd recommend to younger listeners who might be, a way to stand out is to do some pre-work and put some thought behind something and show why you think you might be the right fit.
Well, let's stop for a second, because again, this is one of those things where if you weren't around to remember this sort of stuff, what tell us the idea, the basic pitch of what half.com was going to do.
So the basic idea was you might buy a book and you pay retail for it, and you read it once and it goes back on your shelf and you don't ever read it again. And the idea that what if there was an easy way to buy and sell used books, movies, music, and we also had video games ultimately when we launched. And at the time, there was barely a market for used in any of those categories. So there was no research that would tell you the size of it. It was done in the
there's no
quarter
GameStop
used bookstore.
Yeah.
There was GameStop or Electronics Boutique and some things like that, but they didn't. Used wasn't a big part of what they do. Today, used I would guess is half the profits of GameStop.
Right.
But now it's a very important category. But at the time, it wasn't at all. And and so just helping promote the idea of where used could fit in, and also speed of purchasing and ease of purchasing was, I also think, the real key to it. And I didn't believe this till I was in process of talking to Josh and joining Half, that I actually joined eBay, and I did my first eBay transaction, and I could not believe how hard it was. I I bought something. No, I think I sold something. I sold a book just to see what that would be like, and I had to wait for the person to mail me a check, and then I had to deposit the check and wait for it to clear before I mailed the item. It literally could be weeks of time going by.
And if you're on the other side of that transaction, not only do you have to win the auction, but then you have to go through that process on the other side.
So on the other side, it's a 7-day auction where you're like bidding, waiting, and like at the end of the day, you might get outbid by a penny, and you don't get your item. And it was just so much friction on both sides. They were mailing checks back and forth. Once eBay mailed me a paper invoice telling me that I owed them like 35 cents, and I just could not believe how manual the whole thing was. And Josh's innovation, in addition to used and the pricing advantage, was we created a catalog of every item, so that if you were selling John Grisham's book, you didn't have to scan a picture and describe it and put all the attributes up like 100 people might do in the same day for the same book on eBay. We created a catalog so you could type in the UPC code or the ISBN number.
Right, that's a key thing I think we should say, is all these products that you launch with have the barcodes on them. So it's you can have a database, and if everyone's selling a John Grisham novel, it's the same item.
It's the same item, and then in that case, like the one John Grisham item would have all the listings underneath of it, grouped by quality, like is it brand new or good or fair condition, and then by price. And it was the marketplace dynamics of pushing down price, encouraging people to put a lower price so that it would sell faster.
Well, and the ease of posting, because then you can pre-populate a database with photos of, say, the item. You don't have to take the photos yourself.
Like literally, you could just type in the ISBN number or UPC code, and we even created and patented a thing called cell phone, SELL phone, where you could walk around with your mobile phone and punch in those numbers on an interactive voice response system and load things by taking your phone to your bookshelf rather than lugging your books over to your computer. The real insight was that payments were all handled and intermediated. So half would take the credit card, and then on the other end we would pay the sellers. And it was just instantaneous.
But you're not warehousing anything; they're still sending back and forth.
Say it's not warehouses; it's people's houses.
Gotcha.
And so that was all that was the real innovation.
Because it's reducing the friction. It's more instant gratification for a buyer. I can get it in a couple of days, and for the seller, I can sell it in no time.
You're a college student, and rather than buying this crazily overpriced book, you can get it in a really good version for a whole lot less, and sellers could get value back for items that were otherwise just taking up space on their shelves. And like certain categories like textbook season for books was just, that's what drove the business for so long, because the value prop was so high, the books were so expensive, and we were on the crest of the DVD wave. Like that became the biggest. That new format drove more sales of movies than anything ever had in home video, and we were right there at the right time. It all fit into little nice shipping packets at reasonable prices, and we had quite a business. And I think we were acquired very quickly by eBay, and I think we helped them get a point of view about where fixed price and ease of buying and selling became important. And when they bought us, there was 0% fixed price, and today it's the vast majority of everything that happens on eBay.
Two questions about that. First of all, I believe you guys launch really, really quietly, because obviously you're entering eBay's game here. It's their market, and you're basically trying to disrupt them. So was that a major thing? Like try to launch once we're ready to launch, but until then, no one knows a peep about us?
Yeah, we were operating in stealth mode and high speed mode from when I joined, which was probably August of '99, until we launched in January of 2000. The bulk of everything was built and done, and and I think we had raised about $3 million in venture capital was about the dollars raised, and that was the time we took. But that was back in the day where we had to, part of my job was to get the licenses for the Oracle database and to buy the Sun servers that would have to go on the racks that we would have to get space in. We would have to, we had to integrate and take all these databases and get them into a form that worked. We had to build our own shopping cart. We had like there wasn't open source.
There's
there
no
weren't cloud
off-the-shelf,
computing.
yeah.
There was nothing like you had to build everything. And Sonny, Josh's co-founder on the technical side, basically had an incredible team to build all this stuff. And then my job was I had a few roles, but one of them was to get all the inventory at launch so that we had product in stock. Because when you're launching a marketplace, it's two-sided. You need to have supply there on day one, so you don't have crickets chirping and doesn't have the appearance of a lot of items. So that was a big part of what we did.
My other question is, obviously with retrospect it seems this way, but was it pretty much inevitable that once you show eBay that, hey, there's a slightly different way to do your model, that they're just going to take you out? Like that was kind of the only route there?
No, I think in a lot of big companies, there could be an attitude that this young team did it for not a lot of money in a short period of time, so we can too. We're at eBay, but I think they saw how completely differently we had taken it, and I think they saw Josh's leader and the whole team and how that could be how that could help with innovation,
right,
and be an important part of of eBay.
Right. I had read that was exactly their thinking, was that like we can do this in 12, 18 months, or we just integrate it now. Just bring them over, integrate it now.
And I think I think they also probably had fears of us getting into more and more categories. Like if we were just in the media categories, that might have been one thing. But if we had plans and we're launching into other categories, and that I think at that point it really made sense for eBay to do it.
So I'm encouraging you to toot your horn now, because Half.com originally still is a separate site, but it starts to get integrated, and so what we know now as the Buy It Now button, that basically comes from your integration into what eBay was already doing in the past.
I'm not sure it's a direct descendant, but like I said, like they didn't have anything fixed price or
these
buy
ideas
now,
coming in,
and I think we helped set the stage or helped the thinking evolve on the benefits of that, and then it started like one of the we were acquired in the summer of 2000, and one of the projects I became responsible for a lot of the eBay categories. And one of the projects that Josh and I worked on inside of eBay was bringing the catalog from Half into eBay. And so that was at the time was the biggest project that eBay had ever done in terms of how they measure man hours. They did it in a system with train seats, but that was a big project, and we helped shepherd that through. But other things like, we had the first affiliate program that we used at Half and ended up using it at eBay. We had, we were running Salesforce.com before they were like, maybe they would have done all these things eventually, but I think it might have helped, helped to get started.
Well, and Buy It Now becomes the majority of sales on the traditional eBay marketplace, right?
Yes.
So a good marriage.
Very much so.
Yeah.
They tried to shut down the company at one point, and the users wouldn't let it die. We had announced that we were shutting down Half because it was just not growing as fast as the rest of the business wasn't important, and we essentially announced it was going down, took away all the resources, and it's kept growing. And so eBay did a rare turnaround of a decision and kept the site going, and it's still alive today.
Something that I always take time to point out is that people forget this, but eBay not only survived the dot-com bubble bursting, but it never stopped growing. No. And like in terms of measurements like stock price, market cap, like it reached heights after the bust that it never reached before the bust.
No, it was an island in a nuclear winter. Like the whole tech world was melting down, but eBay was one uniquely stable place that could attract the best talent people were CEOs at startups and coming in as category managers at eBay,
Mhm.
and and there's a great group of folks that are still very active in the Valley at a lot of different places today.
Do you jump off of eBay because of Delicious, or do you take some time off and discover Delicious? How do we get to Delicious?
So I'd end up in a bunch of roles at eBay. I moved out to California with my family for a little while, and then came back east and then opened up the New York office for eBay, and gotten into the strategic partnerships group of eBay, where we helped other brands market on eBay. One example was 20th Century Fox did the first homepage takeover of eBay, as part of a marketing plan. So I was doing things like that and learning new things. But I was also had done it for 6 years and was interested in something different, and took a little break and was starting to pay attention to what had not been yet named, but was Web 2.0, and it was at another TED conference, TED Global in Oxford, probably in early 2006, and in one section of the conference, it was Clay Shirky from NYU talking about crowdsourcing. It was, there were a few speakers, and one of the others was Jimmy Wales talking about Wikipedia in the earliest days, and I had already been talking to Joshua Schachter and Albert of Delicious, and it was that I made that decision, like, coming out of that section of the TED conference, that's the most interesting stuff that's happening on the web today, and this role would mean I'm in charge of business development at one of the hottest New York startups that'll be dealing with all these other companies that I'm interested in working with, and I basically can't go wrong by taking this role, and I made the decision I wanted it right then. And
so obviously we're not the first people to say this, but in my mind, Delicious, Flickr, those were the two sort of clarion calls that, okay, there's stuff starting to happen again, there's new ideas, and I asked you if you could feel it when the bubble starts, but like, take me back there. Could you feel it? Because I can remember that so crystal clear that, okay, there's good ideas out there again.
It was, again, like, I think in some, some negative ways, but like, Delicious was the poster child for Web 2. Like, even in the funky way the name was written, people couldn't even pronounce it right. And everybody wanted to take meetings with us and to potentially partner with us. And I remember, to me, the moment was we were at the Web 2.0 conference. Maybe it was the first one or second. It was in San Francisco at what was the Westin. I'm not sure what it is now. And before the conference, we had a pre-conference session where we had set up, and Joshua Schachter was going to be on a panel speaking about, like, what is tagging? Like, it was something like that generic of a title.
Taxonomies
And I came into the hotel, and the line was outside. It was all the way out, snaked around, and that was to me a moment like, whoa, like, the people are truly, truly interested in this stuff. And in the short period of time that I was there, we went from we gained users, notoriety, importance, and ultimately got acquired by Yahoo.
Talk about Josh just for a second, because Fred Wilson called him like the quintessential accidental entrepreneur, because he's literally just trying to solve a personal problem. He has all these bookmarks he wants to organize. So the Delicious is in that mode, sort of like, this is just something I made for myself now. How do we turn it into something else?
Yeah, so I guess I think there's various layers of how the product resonated to different people, and it clearly was Joshua at his first, his personal problem of how he was managing, bookmarks and links among his friends and for himself, and it literally was like this first, server under his desk at home, And then he attracted attention of people like, Fred and Brad from Union Square, Albert who joined, investors like Esther Dyson. It had good buzz of attracting people that sort of saw where the web was going. But I remember when I was interviewing, like Joshua was an engineer. He's like heads down. He doesn't suffer salespeople too gladly, and I'd have to get his attention to say so show me, how do you as a power user use Delicious at scale? Because I was still trying to get my head around it, and he'd show me, and I became pretty proficient, and I like to use product a lot, and but a breakthrough moment for me, and how did I describe it to partners, was when we sort of talked about it's you'd say to a publisher like the Washington Post was a real example, how do you optimize for social? It's by making sure all your pages are tagged in Delicious from your users, and that was really the first notable commercial deal where we got to put a Save to Delicious button at the bottom of every single page of the Washington Post. And now you can't go to every page has 100 little things you can do, action buttons, save them. But it was the first one that I'm aware of at the time. And Joshua and I were down in DC pitching them, and we what I didn't realize when they made the decision to do it, that they were such a bellwether of the industry. Everybody wanted to do what the Washington Post did, and then the influx kept coming. We ultimately did a big partnership with Mozilla. John Lilly, who's now at Greylock, was the COO at the time there, and we did a big partnership together that essentially put us as a beautifully designed and heavily featured add-on to the Firefox extension bookmarklet, and it was literally right at a time when it was at a big, I think it was Firefox 2.0 was being rolled out or something that important at the time. And when everyone installed it, the landing page most of the time said, now install Delicious. And our usage, users just skyrocketed right while we were raising money, but ultimately getting acquired.
Okay, the marriage with eBay for half was a good marriage. Marriage with Yahoo and Delicious, good marriage?
No, not really. I think it was the right decision from the founder and the company at the time. I think investors would have much rather gone long and done more. And in hindsight, there's a lot of things I think Delicious could have been much bigger and more important. But it was a nice outcome, very quick one certainly for me and others who joined Joshua. I don't think it ever did what it was supposed to do inside of Yahoo, mostly because they had so many other challenges at the time. But it was the deal was led by Jeff Weiner, who's now running LinkedIn. They rationalized the acquisition based on how they thought it would make search results better in their competition against Google.
Right.
To have that corpus of important, saved, described, organized URLs, and I'm not sure they were ever able to prove that or make it happen. They ultimately sold it out. It was bought. Someone else owns Delicious now. I'm not even sure what it is.
Right. Just pointing this out. So your two big startup experiences are these rocket ships that are 18 months, 2 years tops, and then they get absorbed. And is there some sort of a lesson there about the rocket ship nature of some ideas that have to take off, and you have to run as quick as you can? And
well, I think I would admit luck is a very good part of it, and I think I've hitched my wagon to some smart people, including Josh and Joshua, and Josh Koppelman and Howard were both investors in Delicious, so that was a good other connection. But I think I was part of another startup that failed miserably and badly, and but I think the thing that has worked well was when I would go into a situation into a startup knowing that it was the area that I was interested in, working with people that I really liked, and basically could rationalize that even if it failed, it would have been a good, place to learn and to add value and contribute. And Delicious turned into a quick flip into Yahoo. Half turned into a 6-year career at eBay, which until first round at almost 10 years was the longest I've ever worked anywhere. So that worked out very well. But Yahoo being acquired by Yahoo led me to a little bit of working at TED again, but mostly working at first round.
Let's try to get Ted in here again.
Yep.
Because I believe that you're involved in launching the TED Talks and getting them online and getting these videos online. I'm just shooting in the dark here. Was it the YouTube moment when you're seeing that video is this new distribution channel on the web and wanting to get involved in that?
So I've had the fortune of working for some amazing people, and one of them was Chris Anderson, who runs the TED conference. It was his vision to take what was this content at a once-a-year, small conference in Monterey, and unleashing it to the world and giving it away for free. And it didn't make sense, and there were, it was contrarian, but a fascinating idea. And it was 10 years ago.
And it was his idea
this summer. It was his idea, an initiative, and I was in charge of partnerships and sales. So my job was ultimately, we got BMW to underwrite the launch of TED Talks, and it was their visionary involvement that helped pay for it, and and I think it worked out very well for them. And but like you asked, was it the YouTube moment? This was before YouTube. Like it was 10 years ago, and I remember we would go and visit Google Video, which was this oddly shaped screen, and we were working with them. We went to Apple and worked with the folks there who did podcasts, and everybody kind of resonated. In fact, some of our companies, I was working part-time also for First Round, and some of our companies, one of the time Video Egg, was actually the first company to stream the video when the first TED Talks launched. And but ultimately, the first 6 or so videos that launched really resonated. They're beautifully created, and they resonated and got shared and got it's the thing that TED's mostly known for. I don't know what the count is now, but it's in the billions.
Over a billion, yeah. And are you guys surprised by that? I mean, you hear all the time. I go to sleep every night. I just put TED Talks on in the background. I fall asleep.
Yeah, I'm surprised and proud that this thing I had a little bit to do with became as widely known as it is today. I think just the concept of who would think people would want to learn, what they might think is boring topics, but I think it's helped usher in a whole new generation of founders, students, people with ideas of how to present properly, how to there's books that aren't affiliated with TED that are like how to give a TED Talk, how to talk like TED, and and really I think raised up the quality of presentation and engagement, and it made, again, before there were YouTube stars, there were TED Talk stars, and now it all mixes together.
So obviously you're best known today for being involved in First Round, and First Round is one of the premier VCs, especially on the East Coast, but in the world at this point. Almost everyone I talk to is in VC now, and I haven't really asked any questions about that side of it yet. So you're going to be my first experiment. If we have time, 10 more minutes or so, I've got a couple questions. Yep.
I might, but let's go. Let's try it.
What is the mental space when you go to the other side of the table? Like every entrepreneur in her belly feels like her idea is going to change the world. The world just has to see it.
Yeah.
So when you flip to the other side of the table, what is the philosophical change that you have to make to be successful on the other side of the table?
Well, one thing is you having worked on the operating side for 2 decades before starting at first round is, and the investing side is, you get such an appreciation for how hard it is for the entrepreneur, and no matter what we do as investors, we only deserve a very small part of the success of a company, and to try and respect that dynamic about the founder, and it's their idea, and often we say no 99% of the time. It's just the math of it, and I'll often say, and I do believe, like, I'm wrong all the time. I very well may be right here, and I could rattle off a list of great companies that we weren't smart enough to invest in, but hopefully to make sure that the entrepreneur has a good experience and is able to tell their story, and that we're able to give feedback or insight, or often make introductions or be helpful in other ways, short of saying yes and writing a check.
Final question then.
Yep.
Obviously, with this project, I'm going back and I'm looking at history, I'm looking at patterns, and most VCs are previously entrepreneurs, so you have your experience, you have your previous patterns. What is more valuable to being a successful VC, having that previous experience, knowing those patterns, or finding an idea that goes against everything that you've thought, all the experience you've had, and you think is a dumb idea, but saying, you know what, this might work, and taking a leap on something that seems crazy?
I think pattern matching is one of the advantages you get as an investor, is to learn over long periods of time what has worked and what hasn't. That and your operating experience might give you too much experience, or sometimes you say we've got too much scar tissue. Like if we lost money on one kind of investment, it might make us think we never want to do that kind of investment again. I think the contrarian ideas that sound crazy, like, I'll admit, like Airbnb, I didn't see it, but I would have told you that's the craziest idea on earth. Who would ever have done that?
That's such a great example.
But in retrospect, and really not until you actually use the product, do you really understand like how unique and how different it is. And I think what's true, for some of our best investments, and you talk to other investors who were in Facebook, like, they had an insight, they had their reasons, but they didn't know the scale of what those things would become ultimately. And I think it's also in venture, people tend to remember just the winners, and there's a lot of 20/20 hindsight on why investments were made in these winners. But it's it's also a humbling business, and the entrepreneurs are the ones that we have the honor of serving, and they're doing all the real hard work.
Well, Chris Fralic, thank you so much for taking the time, remembering all that, and just fantastic stuff. And
can I say thank you for the project you're doing? I'm a student of internet and tech history, and your stuff is very valuable, and I've really enjoyed it. And you do your homework, and it's great to be here.
I appreciate it so much.